Okay, maybe I could have made this video into a short, but we're already here. Okay, so you know how like you write poetry in the notes app that never sees the light of day? Well, I have some thoughts about poetry that I wrote in the notes app that I couldn't quite keep there because I just want to share it. And I am in no ways saying anything that's like super groundbreaking, but it's something that I've noticed within myself when I'm coming across different poets. There's such a stark difference between an incredible poet and I guess what you would call an Instagram poet. And I'm not trying to say that in a mean way, I'm just saying it's dubbed Instagram poetry because it's a very specific type of poetry that people consider to be kind of bad. For example, Rupi Kaur was a pretty big poet in the mid-2010s. I used to be a fan of Rupi Kaur back in high school. Like when I was 15 or 16, I thought her poetry was genuinely very good. And I think maybe it's because at the time I wasn't super educated on poetry or literature, and Rupi Kaur's poetry actually felt super accessible to me. And I thought that she was doing it well because she was doing all the stuff that I was taught in my English classes, like with poetic techniques. She was using metaphors and similes and imagery, and I thought that made her a really good poet. But then fast forward a few years and now people are like, oh, she's actually a horrible poet. And I'm like, if she's such a horrible poet, then why do so many people like her and enjoy her work? And why is she so divided in this way? And now fast forward many years and I got my literature degree. I'm gonna have to say I kind of agree. She's not the greatest poet. But I don't think that makes her a bad poet either. And now I'm trying to understand like what really is the huge difference between Instagram poetry and real poetry, as people would say. I think the real strife that I have with, I guess, Instagram poetry is that it's often way too abstract to really mean anything. And this isn't any way like any like diss towards people who post their poetry on Instagram, because some of it is very good and very real and very amazing. I'm talking about Instagram poetry specifically as a kind of poetry that is way too general, too bland, and doesn't use enough poetic techniques to really be considered an actual poem. But it's still sold by celebrities. There are so many celebrities out there that have their own poetry books. And I know that a lot of people have an issue with this because they don't think a lot of celebrities are talented enough to be releasing books like this. I decided to look at some poets who are some of my personal favorites to see what difference does it make. Like, why is their poetry so much better, or like what makes a good poem? I feel like the main thing that I notice is that a lot of like Instagram poetry, like that stereotypical type of poetry, it still exists somewhere in that poet's feelings, and it hasn't had the ability to like manifest into something physical yet. Like, I don't want to hear you talking about your feelings. I don't want to know how you feel about your feelings. I want you to show me how I can feel the feelings that you're feeling, if that makes sense. Like, let me feel it, what you're feeling. Like, design it. Design the setting for me so that I can feel what you're feeling. And I notice that's what a very talented poet can do. For example, I'd like to read you August by Mary Oliver, and this is from her book Devotions. I love Mary Oliver. People have a lot to say about her too, but I think she had so much to say about the natural world. She was so wise. She was so wise, and I think if you read some Mary Oliver poetry, literally you will feel better. You will feel better within the hour. Let me read August because this is an example, I think, of an incredible poem. Our neighbor, tall and blonde and vigorous, the mother of many children, is sick. We did not know she was sick, but she has come to the fence, walking like a woman who is balancing a sword inside of her body. And besides that, her long hair is gone. It is short and suddenly gray. I don't recognize her. It even occurs to me that it might be her mother, but it's her own laughter-edged voice. We have heard it for years over the hedges. All summer the children grow now, and some of them with children of their own come to visit. They swim, they go for long walks along the harbor, they make dinners for 12, for 15, for 20. In the early morning, 2 daughters come to the garden and slowly go through the precise and silent gestures of Tai Chi. They all smile. Their father smiles too, and builds castles on the shore with the children, and drives back to the city and drives back to the country. A carpenter is hired, a roof repaired, a porch rebuilt. Everything that can be fixed. June, July, August. Every day we hear their laughter. I think of the painting by Van Gogh, The Man in the Chair. Everything wrong, and nowhere to go. His hands over his eyes. Do you see how she was able to design this picture for us and feel what this family is feeling, about the tragedy they're feeling, about how it's just their ordinary life, everything goes on as usual. They have to come to terms with the fact that their mother is dying. Like, to be able to experience that tragedy yourself as the reader. That's incredible. That's what I'm looking for in a great poet. Another example is Ada Lemone's accident report in The Tall, Tall Weeds. And the first time, I keep hitting my plant, I'm so sorry, but the first time I read this poem, it jump-started something in my heart. It goes, "When the plane went down in San Francisco, I thought of my friend M. He's obsessed with plane crashes. He memorizes the wrecked metal details, the clear, cool skies cut by black scars of smoke. Once, while driving, he told me all about the crashes. The one in blue Kentucky, in yellow Iowa, how people can go on and how people don't. It was almost a year before I learned that his brother was a pilot. I can't help it. I love the way men love." Like, this is just so good. It's like this ability to very seamlessly paint a picture for you. And not just paint it for you, but transport you there very quickly. It's like a really shortened novel in a way, where you're given these characters, you're giving a setting, you're aware that these feelings belong to somebody else, but all of a sudden they're yours as well. And I think a poet who can do that is a good poet. In comparison to that, I was skimming through Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. I liked this a lot when I was in high school because it made sense when I was in high school. I didn't necessarily have more tools. It wasn't until I went to university that I learned how to critically analyze things, and I learned how poetry works at a much deeper level. But at the time, like, I thought this is genuinely good. And a lot of people also thought that this was genuinely good because Rupi Kaur does use poetic techniques. She does use metaphors and similes and imagery. But the thing about Instagram poetry and the thing with people like Rupi Kaur's poetry is that they can't transport you to that place, right? They can't exactly design that physical setting for you to be and to be able to absorb everything of that place. And I feel like that's what a good poet can do. At least from my own perspective. Like, this is just me talking about things that I've noticed in the poetry that I like. For example, Rupi Kaur, this is just a random page that I flipped to, says, "Your name is the strongest positive and negative connotation in any language. It either lights me up or leaves me aching for days." That's good. I liked that back in the day. And there was another one where she was like talking about the sun. Right, it's this one. She says, "I know I should crumble for better reasons, but have you seen that boy? He brings the sun to its knees every night." And it's like, that's also really nice, but I just feel like the words that she uses are really general. Like, the sun, you know, being so powerful, you're more powerful than the sun. Like, I feel like that's something that's been used over and over and over again in poetry, and I just think it's too general still. It's way too abstract. It's so much more harder to be closer to your heart as a poet because I can't really see what you're seeing. I can just sort of understand what you're feeling, but I feel like it needs to be deeper than that. I need to be soaked in your world. A lot of my poetry sounds exactly like this. A lot of my poetry quite literally is just me rambling about my feelings and kind of hoping that someone else also understands those feelings. I think being an actually good, talented poet to like Mary Oliver or Ada Limon, like, it's difficult. It's a really difficult job. But I think the people who can actually do that difficult job are so amazing, and I hope to one day become more like them. I think at the end of the day, like, good poetry convinces you to see the world in the way that the poet sees the world, you know? And I think if you can convince me to perceive the world in the way that you perceive it, I think that's what makes you a good poet. It's so cool coming across all these different voices and having the opportunity and the chance to be a part of their world. Ooh, it's just so cool. Oh, another really good poet, Warsan Shire. Do I have her book up here? Where is her book? No, oh, it's over here. Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth. What a crazy title. Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth. Oh my gosh, okay. Sorry, one last poem. I didn't actually expect to read this many poems today. I thought this was going to be like literally a 5-minute video of me ranting, but I think it might be more than that. But very quickly, I want to read The Kitchen by Warsan Shire because this is such a great poem, and I think it adds to what I was talking about earlier. Half a papaya and a palm full of sesame oil. Lately your husband's mind has been elsewhere. Honeyed dates, goat's milk, you want to quiet the bloating of salt. Coconut and ghee butter, he kisses the back of your neck at the stove. Cayenne and roasted pine nuts, you offer him the hollow of your throat. Saffron and rosemary, you don't ask him her name. Vine leaves and olives, you let him lift you by the waist. Cinnamon and tamarind lay you down on the kitchen counter. Almond soaked in rose water, your husband is hungry. Sweet mangoes and sugared lemon, he had forgotten the way you taste. sourdough and cumin, but she cannot make him eat like you. Like, look at that imagery. Look at everything that is happening under, like, okay, sorry, I don't know why my camera cannot focus right now, but that's just how it's structured. It's just so cool. And isn't that just so good? Isn't that just so good? Like, you're immediately transported there. You can feel the grief this woman is feeling. Oh my god. I love poetry. Now I have to go back to writing exactly like how these Instagram poets write, because I'm just not that accomplished of a writer just yet. But I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Hope you are too. Go write. Okay, bye.